Now, Washington Mornings on the Mall.
105.9 FM.
At AM 630.
WMAL.
6:37 on Wednesday. It's Debate Wednesday. Tonight, Barack Obama, Mitt Romney, they take the stage, and it's on. It's on. A lot of people are going to be standing by. There aren't many people out there still to be persuaded. One reads in the polls, but this will be the opportunity for many people to form their final opinions, and it could change a few minds. We thought we would stop for a moment this morning and talk about the polls and where the race is, and we have on the line now pollster extraordinaire Scott Rasmussen. By the way, in the last election cycle, the Rasmussen poll was tied for first as the most accurate poll when it came down to Election Day. Scott, how are you?
I'm doing great. This is our slow season as we come up to Election Day.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I bet. And I appreciate you taking time because I know you probably are very busy. Now, the Rasmussen tracking poll yesterday had it at 48 Obama, 47. Your polling seems to suggest that it's tightened up, although there are other polls out there which suggest that Obama has a larger lead. Why do you believe it is so tight?
The race is tight because it's all about the fundamentals. President Obama's job approval has been in the 47% range for the last 2.5 years. He's inched up a little bit in the last month. But when a president has a job approval rating in the high 40s, that means his vote total is going to be in the high 40s or maybe 50%, and we're headed for a close race. And the reason his job approval is there is because the economy isn't terrible, but it's not going where people want it to either. 35% of Americans say their finances are in good shape. That's exactly the same as it was in the day President Obama took office.
All right, so your poll shows that 3% of the American public is still undecided. So that means these debates tonight are all important. Do you think that people can still be persuaded to change their minds, or are they locked in by and large?
There's about 10 or 11% who right now say they support Obama or Romney, but acknowledge they could change their mind. Most of them won't, but I mean, they're at least open to the possibility. There's another very small group right now that is still trying to decide between Mitt Romney and a Libertarian candidate, Gary Johnson. So there's a little bit of room there. But in the last two election cycles, the numbers between late September, early October polling and the actual results shifted by about 3 points. Certainly time for enough of a shift like that this time. And when the race is close, that could be decisive.
All right, got one more question. I'm sorry, Brian. I just got to get to one more question. I'm fascinated by this discussion of weighting polls. Now, all polls are weighted. I need you to explain why they're weighted and how you do it a little differently and why your numbers sometimes come up differently and I think more accurately than others.
Well, look, the concept of weighting is necessary because in polling theory, if you just call 1,000 people randomly, you get a perfect sample, but women answer the phone more than men, whites more than non-whites, older people more than younger people, etc. So if you just released your results, you would have a very skewed sample. You have to adjust for an appropriate mix of men and women and young and old and other demographic categories. One of the big disputes in the polling industry is about the concept of weighting by party ID. Should you make sure you have an appropriate mix of Republicans, Democrats, and Independents? We do at Rasmussen Reports. And right now what we're seeing is an expectation. By the way, we don't make these numbers up. We get them out of lots of other polling data. We screen for likely voters over a long period of time, get an estimate of who's going to show up. And what we're seeing is a race where we expect about 36% of voters on Election Day to be Republican, 39% Democrat. That's halfway between the very good year for Republicans in 2004 and 2008's very good year for the Democrats.
Well, typically there are more Democrats than Republicans voting in presidential elections, right?
Right. I mean, that's been true in every election we have exit polling data for. So that's not a surprise. The question is how big is the margin? Back in the 80s, it was much bigger than it's been in recent years. In 2008, Barack Obama had a 7-point Democratic advantage going to the polls. In 2004, the best year for Republicans was dead even, 37% Republican and 37% Democrat. It does look like we're heading for some kind of turnout between those two extremes.
But when you're doing a poll, especially if you're doing a battleground state, do you look at the makeup of the state when it comes to party affiliation as well? Sure. I mean, would you look at Florida, say, differently than Ohio?
Absolutely. You look at them differently in terms of their party ID, but also in terms of their their age demographics. People are a little bit older, by and large, in Florida than they are in some other states. You look at it by the racial and ethnic makeup. So this is part of the ongoing process. You also have to look at geography, make sure you get calls from all over the state.
Right. All right. You've said before that, getting polls right, you have to figure out who is actually going to show up at the polls.
Right.
How do you determine that? I mean, how do you predict, how many young people will show up this time? How many people between, over the age of 75 will show up? I mean, how can you figure that out through your polling process?
You start with a base of what the population itself is, and then we do have a series of screening questions that we ask people. And with those screening questions, we estimate who is likely to show up and vote. One of the most significant questions is, how interested are you in the campaign? And people that are following it on a daily basis are much more likely to show up and vote than people who are tuning it out. And so that is really the first step in the process, getting a sense. And what you find, not surprisingly, seniors are much more interested and engaged and likely to show up than younger people.
All right. I heard you say not too long ago that despite how close the polls are, you thought it might not actually be close on November 6th. Why is that? Why do you think that?
Because there are still events that could change things. Between now and November 6th, we have 3 presidential debates, a vice presidential debate, 2 jobs reports, and an unsettled situation in the Middle East. And there can also be other surprises. If something changes in the reality of where we are in the campaign or the reality of the news cycle, these numbers could change a few points.
All right. So, is foreign policy something that many voters are focused on? I mean, the situation in Libya, the story continues to get more interesting and more interesting each and every day. Now there are calls for, investigations, etc. Is that something that is likely to resonate with the American people? Will they pay attention to that? Will it change minds?
So far, there has been limited interest, and 11% of voters now say national security is the top priority. That's up from 5% before the unrest started. But still not a huge issue.
And finally, because we are here in D.C. and we take great interest in what happens across the river in Virginia, which is a key battleground state, what is the lay of the land in the Commonwealth?
Right now, we are showing Barack Obama up by just a single point. That poll, though, is a couple of weeks old. We will be checking there after the debates and see where things are. The Senate race, very much where it's been all year. It's a toss-up. And, Brian, I do want to say one thing. These debates, while people are talking about them and hyping them, historically they haven't brought about much instant change. 4 years ago, going into the first debate, it was Obama 50, McCain 45. Coming out, it was Obama 51, McCain 45.
All right. And by the way, as mentioning Virginia, I see that NBC just put out a poll that said in Virginia they see Obama up by 2. So it's still, your poll and that poll seem to suggest very tight.
Yeah, and again, a lot of these things, the fundamentals of the race do suggest that this is a close election nationally. If it's close nationally, it's going to be close in a state like Virginia.
Yeah. Right. Just curious, do you include Virgil Goode in that when you ask people who they're going to vote for? Or do you just say, hey, it's Romney or Obama?
We always have Romney, Obama, or some other candidate.
Okay. Scott, it's a pleasure to have you on. We know you're very busy. Thank you very much. We
really appreciate it.
We'll look forward to talking.